So Xan Hong, I got to tell you, way back in 1984, okay, there was a movie called The Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension, okay? And the main character, Dr. Buckaroo Banzai, is a physicist, a neurosurgeon, a test pilot, and a rock star, okay? And Xan Hong is the person most like Buckaroo Banzai that I've ever met. Okay, he got his bachelor's degree in biology from the University of Pennsylvania and later got his master's in education, also from UPenn. He served as an adjunct professor in entrepreneurial finance at Lincoln University, and he regularly volunteers his time mentoring and speaking to youth from inner city schools. Beyond that, he's been an entrepreneur, 15 years of varying industries: real estate, development, food and beverage, e-commerce, insurance, financial services, marketing, communications, and technology, okay? And he's grossed over 10 million in revenue in these businesses. And his expertise is in marketing strategy, digital marketing, and sales, okay? So this guy kind of has the whole gamut, okay? Currently, he's the founder and CEO of On Track Technology, and that company empowers individuals to reach their potential by simplifying the process of achieving their life goals. They're currently in beta testing and will be launching a live version later in the year. He's an investor and principal in an independent insurance agency, and he owns an e-commerce business. So that's a few things. So Xan, welcome, and tell us how you do all this stuff and still have time for a life.
Yeah, I'll do my best. It still takes up a decent amount of time, but I could not do it with some of the things that I'm going to share today. So hold on one second. Let me just, all right, can everyone see the slides? So yes. Joe just gave me, thank you, Joe, for that introduction. I think the one thing I just want to say about that is I give that intro because I think anytime you hear a presentation, whether it's from me or anyone else, I think you should be able to handicap that opinion or advice that person's giving, right? Because I think at the end of the day, a presentation for the most part is going to be an opinion or advice, and it's going to be based on my personal experiences or the speaker's personal experiences, right? So I think the important thing to realize is, everything I'm sharing today is based on my personal experience. Some of it's based on fact, some of it's going to be based on my experience that worked for me. Doesn't mean that everything I say is going to work for everyone, and so there's no right or wrong answer when it comes to this. I think it's just, I want you to inform yourself and understand that, look at my experience and handicap anything I say today, because it's going to be based on my experience, and so it may or may not apply to your industry as well as it's worked for me. So I just want to kind of frame this overall discussion based on that. All right. So when I started, I think when I first started, I kind of started in entrepreneurship kind of by accident. I actually got laid off from my company, and randomly, I'll be honest, I kind of got, when I got laid off, I actually got a 7-figure contract from the company, because the client that I was working on basically said, "Hey, we want to work with you," right? And so I kind of got lucky, and so I didn't know anything about entrepreneurship. I was a 25-year-old at the time. I kind of tell people that I was like a 16-year-old getting the keys to a Lamborghini, right? Like I all of a sudden I had this 7-figure contract, trying to figure out how to make it all happen. And I got it. I had a 1-bedroom condo. I had employees working at my 1-bedroom condo, and we made it work. And so when I first started, not knowing what I was getting into, I was judging myself I was judging the success of my business based on a couple of things. One was, how many employees I had. I figured out the more employees I had, the more successful my business was. And also how hard I was working. I figured I was working really hard, so my business must be successful, right? And so over the years, I've come to realize that I judge my businesses very differently now. In fact, it's quite the opposite. So I actually judge myself on how few employees I have now, right? So if I have fewer employees, that's actually a more successful business. It's really, and probably more accurate description is revenue per employee, right? And so I think that's probably more accurate. And also how little time I'm spending on my businesses, right? And so I'm not going to go into it, but I had some challenging times over the last couple, probably 3-4 years ago, where I raised money for a business. It failed. And then also my father, who I hadn't spoken to, in probably 10 years, he passed away before I could go out and see him. And I think the biggest thing I learned from that is time is your most valuable resource. And so I have changed my mindset completely once I really kind of realized, like, whatever I do, I evaluate everything from that lens of how am I maximizing my time. So when you scale now, and it was an angel investor that kind of, gave me this framework, and I've really kind of adopted it, and I think it served me well, is, I think in the past, I would always go to try and hire more employees first. But the reality is now when I look at trying to scale, I kind of do it from the opposite. So when I try and scale, the first thing I look at is all the tasks that need to happen. First thing I try and do is automate it first. Then if I've automated as much as I possibly can, then I try and outsource to, whether it's virtual assistants or some sort of firm that specializes in that. And I'll kind of talk about that. And then if all else fails, at that point, will I try and hire someone. And so essentially your goal should be to remain a solopreneur as long as freaking possible. And that's in most cases, right? So for instance, if you're trying to go after a venture capital, they don't like, outsourcing. They like employees, right? Because, the idea behind it is that, hey, everyone's, you can kind of control things more, you can kind of get people that are more aligned with your mission. But other than that, I would say your goal should be to try and remain as a solopreneur as long as freaking possible. That's kind of my general, philosophy now. And so let's start with automation. So automation is, what are some of the advantages of automation? So number one is, cost. Employees or just people are expensive, and that's the truth of it, right? And so the speed of automation, a lot of times automations are going to happen a lot quicker. Consistency, you're going to get the same thing over and over and over again, right? And I'm going to talk about that. Could be a good thing, that could be a bad thing, right? But that's going to be the advantages of automation, where you know what you're getting every single time if you create the automation correctly. What are the disadvantages of automation, right? So you don't have the advantage of having a judgment call. And again, this could be a good thing, this could be a bad thing. But you don't have the advantages of when something comes up. There's not everything is black and white, and automation is going to be great for things that are black and white. When things are gray, sometimes you need a human, and artificial intelligence is on the rise, but it still has limitations, right? So when there's gray, you with automation, you don't have the ability to have a human kind of look at that and make a judgment call based on a variety of factors, right? And so it could be just context, it could be what the weather is that day. It could be a variety of things where a human can take these factors and make a judgment call on them. With automation, you can't really have that judgment call. And this is from personal experience. If you've created the automation incorrectly and you turn that sucker on, you can create a rather large mess very quickly, right? And I'll be honest, I've done it, and I've created a big mess for myself, and so that's kind of the one of the downsides. Another one is if you're doing some custom stuff, and I'm going to talk about a variety of different automations today, but if you're doing custom stuff, there's typically a large upfront cost to create that automation, right? So I'm going to give a case study. It's actually my own business, one of my own businesses. It's one of, and so it's one that I share a lot. And I find that when I talk about this, it really gets people excited and just gets their brain juices flowing. So that's why I use this in my main case study. So just for some context, so this is a business I've had since 2018. It does about $300,000 to $400,000 a year in revenue. So that equates to about $5,000 to $8,000 a year in order. I don't have any employees. And right now I probably spend less than an hour a day running it, right? And so the main product is our paint. Well, it's basically the only product is a paint by number kits. And about 80% of them are custom kits where customers will upload a photo and we'll convert it for them, and then they get to paint their photo, and it actually comes out quite beautiful, actually. So one of the main processes that relates to a custom kit is prior to the automation, we'd have to, we were on Shopify, we're on WooCommerce now, so we'd have to they would upload the photo. So from the order, we'd have to download the customer's photo. We would save it to Google Drive. We would send that photo to our vendor. The vendor would convert it using their software, send back a proof. We then have to send a proof to the customer. And then once the customer approved it, we'd have to, let the vendor know, hey, it's approved, and go ahead and produce the kit and obviously send it to the customer. So here's what we did. So we actually built, using a no-code platform called Bubble. It's bubble.io. We built a custom admin and vendor dashboard. So this is the admin dashboard. So basically, the admin dashboard, we integrated with Shopify, actually now WooCommerce, where when the new order comes in, it brings that order in, and the photo is automatically imported into the dashboard. Right. So we also have a vendor dashboard that looks very similar. So now they have access to these photos. So now we've eliminated having to download it and send it to the vendor. So the vendor, actually right here, we actually assign it to the vendor that we use. Right now we're using one vendor. So that's actually automatically done as well. So what happens is the vendor, when they get this, so incomplete proofs, they'll see all the proofs that are outstanding. They will take the photo, they'll download it, import it into their software, upload the proof into this platform. As soon as they upload into the platform, it will email and text, although the text we actually have set so because they're 13 hours ahead in China. So we don't want to text people in the middle of the morning. So we actually have that set to delay, so it doesn't send that text until after 9 a.m., between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. And so what happens is the customer gets a link to this page, right? And so they can they can actually approve it from here. So there's a checkbox from here. They can add comments. And then if they check mark that they want it approved, there's a checkbox that says, hey, do we have permission to share the proof of your custom paint by number kit on our social media accounts? We will not post the original photo. And if they check that and hit submit, it actually automatically posts that proof to all our social media accounts. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest. And so I'll get to kind of the results of that in a second. And so one thing I want to point out is customers love this process. So not only have we saved a ton of time, but we've actually improved the customer experience as well. So just real quick, it says, let's see, I love the ability to approve my rendering before finalizing my order as well. So it's something that they love as well. So if you look, we just added Instagram because the Instagram API had some limitations. So we actually just added Instagram auto posting. So it's kind of small, but in the first month when we added this, so we increased the number of accounts we reached on Instagram by 892%. And then our accounts engaging increased by 7,000%. And actually we grew our following by 5% during that time. And we did that with completely automated content, right? And so, I just want to point that out. Our Pinterest account's pretty similar. At one point, our Pinterest account was up to 1.3 million impressions per month. Again, with all automated content. We never have posted manually on Instagram. So again, just real quickly, a lot of people aren't familiar with no code. So what is no code? Essentially, it's kind of visual programming where you're using kind of pre-built elements and you're creating these automation workflows so you can do it without writing a line of code. So that's the beauty. There's a lot of ability now to do these automations, either yourself or with the help of an agency to do this. And it's much cheaper, much quicker than it used to be with having to kind of manually code this. So there's a huge opportunity now for small businesses to do stuff. So why use no code? So it's speed, and therefore cost is going to be much lower. The other benefit is now, if you used to work with a coder, a lot of times the coder didn't freaking have any idea what your business model was. And so they're trying to build something they just don't fully understand. Now you can have the end users become the builders, and that's huge. The other thing that we found with no code is we can kind of build something really quickly and cheaply, and then just very quickly kind of make changes as we got feedback. That version of that dashboard that you saw is after 2-3 years of kind of optimizing that based on kind of using it over time. And then I said, did I mention speed? And I just say that to kind of stress the fact that speed is really the most important thing. As a small business, as a one-person business, speed is your biggest advantage, right? Over a larger company. So popular no-code platforms you can use, Bubble's the one that, we build a bunch of products, custom products for small business. That Bubble's probably 95% of what we use. But Adalo, Xano, Softer, Zapier, we use Zapier actually sometimes in conjunction with Bubble, Airtable, Glide, Builder.ai. This list is growing by the minute. So this is by no means a all-inclusive, kind of a all-inclusive list, but these are some of the tools you can build to build some of these automations. And so, maybe sometimes a custom application is overkill. Well, the beauty is there's a lot of applications right now that are out there that can do a lot of things without having to build something custom. And so I lump this into what I call marketing automation. And so, some of the popular marketing automation platforms right now, Joe, I know you're a big HubSpot component, Zoho, Keep, which used to be called Infusionsoft, or as it was popularly known as Confusionsoft. And so there's Freshworks, Pipedrive, Insightly, ActiveCampaign. Go High Level is one that I use that's primarily geared towards agencies that kind of build for other folks. So let me just walk you through kind of another case study. So this is actually a consulting business that I started in June of last year. We did about $33,000 in business in 2022. We're actually on pace to do about $250,000 in 2023. And we would not be in that position without marketing automation. So let me just kind of walk you through this life cycle of lead generation that we use, which is probably pretty similar to what most consulting businesses would encounter, right? So what we've been doing is we've been doing lead generation through a variety of digital marketing channels. And I want to point out that, I also do some stuff with BNI and things like that. But I want to point out that the reason why I really have been focused on trying to get these digital marketing channels to work is going back to time, right? Something like a BNI, if you're not familiar, which is a Business Networking International, which is kind of like a monthly meeting that I go to every morning on Thursdays at 7:15. It's actually been a big chunk of what we've gotten so far, but it takes a lot of my time, right? It takes me a ton of time to go out there, meet with everyone, on a weekly basis. With these digital marketing campaigns, ideally what I'm doing is passively putting leads into this funnel that we're creating through Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, and TikTok. I've experimented with TikTok. That's kind of newer for me, but those are kind of the main channels that we're using right now. Ideally, what we're trying to do is get them to schedule an appointment, either submit a lead form or schedule an appointment. Ideally, right now, we're trying to optimize for scheduling an appointment. And then, basically, we're trying to make sure they're coming to those appointments through automated emails and text reminders, right? And then we can also send kind of messaging prior to that meeting. After the meeting, we can also send kind of follow-up messaging, again, through automated platforms. And then from there, ideally, I'm going to try and get them to say, hey, I want you to send me a proposal for what you're doing, right? And then ideally, they love the proposal, they pay for it, and then they we start the project with them. So right now, what I'm doing is I am, using a scheduling tool. It could be a Calendly. In my case, again, I'm using High Level. Once they schedule it, we're sending automated email and text reminders. We're using High Level, but that could be done with HubSpot. That could be done with ActiveCampaign. That could be done with a number of things. And then we're getting, through the proposal requested. Once they request the proposal, I'm using a tool called Proposify, which I can do a number of things through that. I create the proposal, I can send it to them, they can make their first payment through there. And then from there, I'm using Zapier to basically connect all these things together, where I'm sending information from the lead to Proposify. Once I move them to proposal requested, it automatically creates the initial proposal in Proposify, and then I can just dump in. I got a couple templates created in there already. So then really all I have to do is go in there, adjust the pricing, and then kind of the scope is what I have to do. And then once they accept it, then it automatically creates. And actually, Michael Lynn, I think he's on this. I don't know, he might be on this call, but he turned me on to project.co. That's our project management tool, and that's how we manage all our existing business from there. But Zapier is kind of what I use to connect all these things together, and I can kind of move things and send, email addresses, names, and kind of create actions within all these tools to make this happen automatically without me having to kind of manually do it. And then what I do from there, which has been hugely important, is it creates kind of opportunities within the tool I use. But again, this can be done. And I know HubSpot has kind of a pipeline tool where I can kind of keep track of all the opportunities. I can keep track of where they came from a marketing source. I can look at conversion rates. I love that part of it, where I can kind of look at, okay, here are all my different marketing sources. I can look at, okay, what are my conversion rates, and where's the high quality leads coming from, and then kind of focus my spend in those areas. So, all right. So then, and I'm going to leave time for questions at the end, but okay, what happens when you've exhausted automation? That's where I look at offshore, primarily offshore automation, outsourcing. I do have some onshore outsourcing as well. Some other terms that are really I've heard about that are new. I've heard it referred to as drop servicing and service arbitrage, which I think are interesting. And you'll be able to, I'll talk through why that is, right? And so one of the benefits of outsourcing, in this case, I'm talking about primarily offshore outsourcing. So you're taking advantage of cost of living differences, right? So that's the big one. And so that's where the arbitrage comes in, right? That buy low, sell high, right? So you're taking advantage of the fact that in some of these countries, so a lot of the outsourcing teams I'm using are in Pakistan, are significantly lower than what they are in the US. So that's one of the big things. Number two is it's infinitely scalable, right? So you can increase or decrease your labor source in a very fluid way. And I think the increase is just as important as the decrease. Just having been in the past where I've had a lot of employees, when your business volume drops, you're with employees, it's hard to let go of employees, right? And you don't want to. A lot of times you've built relationships with them, and so when business drops, just for economic conditions or whatever it might be, you're in this position where you're having to pay these employees, and you just don't necessarily have enough work to do that. So when you're using outsourcing, a lot of times, and I built my systems out in a way where I can increase or decrease as needed. That's a really important thing, and that leads to the second part with the flexibility. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has experienced this, but the first time after I let go of an employee and I got that increase in the unemployment bill, that was a huge shock. I mean, so in insurance, that was the big one where I had to, it was hard to find employees for my insurance agency, but I let, my first person go, and then my unemployment insurance bill went up. It went from like a couple $100 per pay period to like $2,000 to $3,000. Like it was $2,000 to $3,000 because I had probably quite a bit of payroll, and so that was a pretty big difference. And so that was an eye opener for me. So when you use outsourcing, those are some of the things that you don't have to, are less of a concern, right? So the outsourcing team, they're the ones that are worrying about that kind of stuff. So some of the differences of outsourcing, if we're talking about offshore, is lack of time difference. So time differences. So sometimes they're 10, 12, 11 hours difference. So you have to kind of manage that and time your meetings so that you can kind of account for that. Although a lot of the teams that I use will actually cater to my time zone. The lack of control. So they're not your employees, right? So that's why venture capital firms prefer employees, right? Because you don't kind of have as much control over them. They may not share the mission, the passion of what you're working on. The big one, and actually I thought I put it on here, but it's not. But a lot of times there's language and cultural differences, and when you're hiring them, the skill set may not be there, and so I think that's really important, because as you build the systems to work with these teams, you have to take that into account. So what are some of the keys to outsourcing successfully? So number one, basically, kind of along the lines of what I just said, is you're you're paying a lot less for this labor, but you're getting what you're paying for. In addition to the fact that there's a cost of living difference, a lot of times their skill set is not as high as, you're not getting college graduates, right? And so what you have to do to be successful is you have to break your task down into its most simple pieces. When I say most simple pieces, I mean, you can't say send an email to, you have to say send this exact email to this person at this time at 10 o'clock on Wednesdays, right? You can't just say, hey, next, send this email on to, next week and whatever, I want them to do this. No, you have to spell out exactly what you want that person to do. And that's not an accident. That's purposely done on purpose, because I cannot stress this point enough. You have to break it down into its most the tiniest pieces. Here's the other thing I've learned over time is the first couple times I used VAs, virtual assistants, for those that aren't familiar. I think I was under the expectation I was hiring an employee, right? And so an employee, and I wanted to give them autonomy. I wanted to kind of give them, I don't want to be a micromanager. So I really wanted to kind of hire these generalists, right? So that could do a bunch of things. I learned very quickly that VA generalists are typically not the best approach. So what I've done is, when I break down these tasks into its tiniest pieces, I try and assign those tasks to teams that are specialists in that particular thing. So for instance, a big part for my e-commerce site is customer service. I initially had a VA that was a generalist. She was not the best at customer service. And so, she was from Latin America, and just culturally, some of the things she would phrase things in a way that were just culturally came across as very aggressive to some of my customers. So it did not go over well. So I moved the customer service piece to specialists, where all they did is 24/7 customer service. And so their team was trained on best practices for customer service. If anything, their higher ups were giving me suggestions on how I should handle certain things. So that was much better. Social media, I would kind of hand that off to a team that focused on social media, right? And again, going back to what I talked about, so being really explicit, I can't stress that enough, in providing direction. So providing scripts of emails, scripts of what to say, providing Loom videos of step-by-step, what do you want this VA to do? This is crucial to being successful with outsourcing. This is a personal preference. The first couple times I hired off of UPWORK, I've had horrible experiences with VAs off of UPWORK. There might be some people that have had better experiences than I personally have had horrible experiences with UPWORK. So I prefer agencies over individuals for a number of reasons. So with agencies, number one is you get a shared team a lot of times. Sometimes they'll have an individual, but I prefer the agencies where I'm getting like a shared team. I have probably 2 or 3 of them that are like that right now. And so number one, I'm not beholden to that one individual. My VA that was running my e-commerce site, who I've switched over, I'll share in a second. She kind of started, she knew she was the only VA, so she started negotiating with me, trying to push, the pay rate a little bit higher. And, she knew she was the only one. And so she started to kind of like not be as responsive. So with an agency, I've got kind of one main contact where I can hold that person accountable. If someone is sick one day, they've got redundancies in that, right? And so I'm not, everything doesn't shut down when that one person is out, or if someone leaves, they've got the systems in place where they can plug someone else in really easily. So that's why I prefer an agency over an individual. Personal preference, but I've just had better success with under that model. So here are some of my current outsourced teams right now. So I've got 7 of them. So just kind of real quick. So I mentioned this. So it's a 24/7 chat and email customer service team. So they probably handle the bulk of what they do. And they also kind of have a VA team that handles some of the admin tasks like order tracking and order processing and things like that. I also have a 24/7 call customer support team. So that's US based. And that's because people, have a little bias against people with accents. So having a US based customer support team, which doesn't cost me that much, and I'll share that in a second, has been huge. I have a no-code development team. And so, that is significantly cheaper than what it would cost to have a US-based development team. I have a digital marketing automation team. So they build out a lot of the campaigns for me. I usually direct them. Here's what I want you to do. And then, they'll also kind of build out these marketing funnels for me. And I pay them a monthly fee, and I've got access to a variety of people with a variety of different skill sets. So between graphic design, building the funnels, WordPress, Shopify, they can do a lot of different things for me. And I'm paying one monthly fee to have access to a variety of different people within that team. I have an influencer marketing team that basically they do outreach to influencers, get them to buy into a program that we have where we send them a product and then they post on that product. And so that's been interesting for me. I have a bookkeeping team that is US based, and then I also have an Amazon FBA store. And so I have a team that actually runs that for me. So real quick example that I've had, I've used Upwork, I've used FIVERR. Again, my personal experience, but I've had a horrible experience with Upwork. I've actually had a really positive experience on FIVERR. And I think it goes back to what I said is with Upwork, if you look at the page, like a lot of people they're advertising generalists, right? And if you look at FIVERR, people are advertising really specific things. So for instance, I've had a guy, I'm not sure where he's based, but I've launched several apps on the app stores, and all he does is create screenshots for my app store listing. And he has an ad for that on FIVERR, right? And so it's $30 for him to do, and they come out beautiful. And it's $30. That's the best $30 I've ever spent, right? And so with FIVERR, there are people, the individuals on there are advertising very, 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 very specific skill sets, and they're giving examples of that skill set. On Upwork, a lot of times they're advertising pretty general, skill sets. And again, I've just had horrible experiences with that. Maybe there's people in here that have had better experience than I, but I think that's part of the reason why I've had better experience with FIVERR. So just a quick case study on, kind of experience I had with, again, it's actually the same e-commerce business. So I started out with a single VA. She was based in Colombia. She did a nice job. She ran the store for me for 2 years, right? And she did a nice job. But a couple things started to happen. So number one is she was $1,800 a month, 9 to 5. So she had 9 to 5. And again, I got this feeling that she realized that she was running everything. So she kind of started to do things where, work quality started to drop. She started trying to negotiate a higher rate for her. As I mentioned, she wasn't great at customer service, which is a really, a big piece of what I need for that business. And it was also hard to scale, right? If I got a lot of, 50% of our revenue for this business was done in November, December. She was miserable during November, December, right? I gave her a nice little bonus, right? So it kind of, offset it, but it was really hard to scale. And so there was no way for me to increase capacity during that time and then decrease it down. So when I went to this model of having multiple VA teams, number one is, so my chat and email team that also does a couple other things. So they cost me $800 a month. And then my 24/7 call team, which I don't get that much call volume, but it's a per minute basically pricing. And so they cost me $300 a month, right? So I'm paying $1,100 per month combined. And now I'm getting 24/7 coverage. And in both cases, I got a supervisor I can hold accountable when things go, things kind of don't go the way I want to. It's much easier to scale up and down. So if I need to, I can add capacity in both those cases during November and December. And I can scale it down in January. I can't do that with a single VA. And then I can take advantage of what I call kind of shared experts, where I got this team of folks. You know, I'm not just hiring one individual and stuck with what that person is good at, right? So let me stop there. I know I just gave you a bunch of stuff. Hopefully it triggered some stuff. Joe, how am I on time?
You're in great shape. We've got 10 minutes before we're out of here.
Ah, see, look at that. So we've got 10 minutes for questions, and hopefully, oh crap, I just turned on my massager on my chair. Hold on one second here. Just started getting hit in the back here. So let me open and answer any questions, and you know, hopefully there are some, or unless I did such a great job that everyone knows how to do this now.
Well, just feel free to unmute and ask if and yeah. Anybody have any questions?
I had a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry if I might have missed it. Can you go back to the agency examples you were talking about, how if you're able to share what kind of, yeah, when you say you work with an agency over an individual, what that looks like, or what some examples of that?
Yeah, so basically, you know, I mean, so an individual obviously is like someone that you would get off an Upwork, or you know, there's other kind of databases that you would get. And also, just to be fair, there are some agencies where their model is they'll give you an individual and they'll assign you that individual, and that's your individual, right? So that's kind of, I would lump that in the same, right? So basically, I'm saying a situation where I've got one individual and that's it. I've got a couple situations where, so for the 24/7 chat and email team, I'm not paying for an individual. I'm paying for 24/7 coverage and a shared team where they're doing customer service for a number of different other individuals, but that's how they can give customer service. You know, that's they can provide customer service 24/7, and it ends up being cheaper because, you know, they're not spending all 24 hours on mine, right? It's, at the end of the day, it's probably a very small percentage of it is being presented, you know, spent on my agent or my business in this case, right? And so you're getting a team of individuals that are shared versus kind of dedicated resources. Same thing with my digital marketing / marketing automation team. I've got a team of individuals I'm paying a monthly fee to, and I've got access to that entire team of individuals, where I can, you know, if I need graphic design, I can tap into that. If I need someone to build a funnel, I can tap into that. If I need someone to build me a WordPress site or a Shopify site, I can tap into that. And so I'm paying for a team of individuals versus like one dedicated individual. Does that make sense?
Well, how do I, yeah, the question is, how do I find this team? Like, yeah, if I did want to find an agency that had 24/7 coverage or graphic design team with a bunch of people working, how could I find one of those?
So you Google that, and then you talk to a bunch, and then a lot of times you go through, you may have to kiss a couple frogs to get to your prince or princess. And so luckily now I have a team I trust. And so as I, you know, as Joe kind of alluded to, there's other opportunities I always look at. And so I can just tack on that team. I have a team, you know, there's other kind of drop shipping opportunities. I can build a team around the existing ones. But candidly, just to be fair, it's taken me some time to vet out the teams I'm using right now, right? But it comes, the first thing I would do is look at your needs, right? What do you need? You break those tasks down, right? So maybe part of it's social media, part of it's appointment scheduling. You break that down into kind of categories, and then you look after kind of specialists that do those things. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question, Andrew?
No, it does. And I guess last question is, are you able to refer your team by any chance, or are they at capacity? Sounds like
they're not at capacity. So you want to hit me up? I can do that introduction.
Perfect. Thank you.